Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to talk about the books I read in October. Before we start the video, I do want to apologize if I sound weird and if it sounds like I'm sucking on a cough drop, because I have a cold and it is affecting my voice, but I really wanted to get this video out there, so I apologize. So October was a very fun month, a very busy month with Halloween and all of the things leading up to Halloween. And I still managed to read 10 things, but I feel like it was a very slow start. And then the last 4 or 5 days, I finished like 4 or 5 books. It was very not evenly distributed. So I read 10 things, which was a total of 2,688 pages. 7 of the books I read were print, 1 was an ebook, 2 were audiobooks, and then I did have 1 DNF this month. So let's dive in. So first, let's get the DNF out of the way. I was pretty bummed out because this was an anticipated 2023 release for me, but I DNF'd Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. I made it about 40 pages in and decided it just wasn't for me. I feel like there was a lot of characters not only introduced, but then like referenced by whoever was the POV at the time, because it switches POVs. And my brain wasn't having it. So maybe in the future, I'll try to attack this one again, but for now, it's a DNF. So I started out the month by reading Rouge by Mona Awad. And this was a book I was anticipating, and Mona Awad is an author that I had been wanting to try because I hear she has some great vibes and like horror, but it's kind of weird, and I wanted to know what it was all about. So I read Rouge, which deals with a young woman named, I want to say her name was Belle. It's been a while. And her mother passes away, and she has to go back to California to deal with her mother's affairs. And her mother was a very beautiful woman and one who was really into skincare and beauty things. And she finds out, and our main character she's also very like obsessed with skincare and using all these products on her face every day. And she discovers that her mother was a part of this spa, this very special spa, and it sort of takes her down this crazy road. And this book was weird and at times confusing. Like, there was quite a bit of the book where I was like, I don't really know what's happening, but the vibes are good. Like, I'm digging the vibes and just the weird sort of fever dream of it all. So I'm just gonna stick with it, because I did at one point consider DNFing it because I was just so like lost, but I kept going. And I did like the ending. I did like the vibes. It feels like a dark fairy tale. It even references things that you often see in fairy tale stories. Like, the biggest example I have is there's kind of a magic mirror sort of thing in this book, which obviously is something that we have seen in fairy tales before. Those things about the book were interesting, and I did like them. I also didn't mind the writing. It was just, for me, this is definitely more a book about the vibe than like the actual plot or the characters. And you're just kind of along for the ride. And so in that regard, it was fine. I liked the things that Mona Awad had to say about the beauty industry and just like beauty in general. And I also liked the mother-daughter vibes, because they definitely had an interesting relationship, and so I liked the way that she explored that relationship. So overall, I gave Rouge 3 stars, and I think I might try Mona Awad again. I'm thinking I might want to try Bunny. So yeah, I haven't like written her off and said, nope, she's not for me. I'm still not sure. I feel like Mona Awad is the type of author that down the line, she'll always be maybe like a 3-star type of author for me. But that doesn't mean I don't want to read her stuff, because I just feel like some of her stuff, I'm never going to truly get it. But I want to just kind of go for the ride. So all in all, it wasn't a bad read. I did get it from my library, so I have since returned it. But all in all, it wasn't terrible. The next 3 books that I read in October, I'm not going to talk about here because I've talked about them in another video. I did a round of 5-star predictions with Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand and Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library for their ongoing series, Booklist Thursday. So I read these 3 books and I did a whole video where I wrapped them up already, but I read Helen Oyeyemi's White is for Witching, and I gave this 3.5 stars, I think it was, or maybe it was 3, I can't remember. The Hollow Kind by Andy Davidson was a 5-star read, and King Diamond's Abigail was a 4-star read. So if you want more of my deep thoughts on these 3 books, go check out that 5-star prediction wrap-up video. Another book that I'm not going to talk about in this video because I already talked about it in a reading vlog is Holly by Stephen King. I did another episode of Books and Baking where I read this book and cooked recipes from a Stephen King themed cookbook. So it was super fun. It was very timely, like this time of year. It was a great time to do the video. I ended up giving Holly 4 stars. I did enjoy it. But if you want my deep thoughts and you want to see me cook some recipes out of that cookbook, go check out that vlog. Next up on my Kindle, I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. And this is one of those sort of horror classics that I've always wanted to tackle. And I read Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House a year or 2 ago, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I've been wanting to read her stuff again. And this one, I kind of went into it not really knowing a lot about it, but it deals with our main character, whose name is Mary Catherine, but she goes by Mary Cat, and she's 18 years old, and she lives in this little village, kind of on the outskirts of this little village, in this big, beautiful home with her sister, Constance, and her uncle Julian. And you know right at the beginning that her family is not looked at very nicely in the village where she lives. And you find out it's because her entire family, her mom, her dad, and I believe she had a brother, and then her aunt, were poisoned at the house. They died of arsenic poisoning. Somebody poisoned the food. And so she and her sister and her uncle are still living in this house, and they still have to go to town periodically for, you know, groceries and to go to the library and things. And Mary Cat is the one who sort of goes out into the town and has to face the people. And yeah, they don't treat her very nicely, and she doesn't really care too much for them either, and it's just this sort of interesting thing. And the whole story is told through Mary Cat's eyes. She goes back to the house and you sort of see what their life is like, and this story was good. It had a very atmospheric, I guess you could say, vibe. I really loved the setting, the big house where they lived, where you can tell that it was once this very beautiful home, but has since sort of fallen into disrepair a little bit. Because the death of this family, the family members, you know, has attributed to the sort of decline of this family, their stature in the town, and also like their physical home. And I really liked that. I liked there's just this sort of sense of doom, I guess. You just feel, it's hard to describe. It was sort of unsettling because you know something's not right, and you know that like they died by terrible circumstances, and you're like, what happened there? But Mary Cat is an unreliable narrator. She's not really telling you anything. She's just telling you what's going on in her life at the moment and not really reflecting too much on things. And you're kind of like, so you can't really trust her in a way. She's unreliable that way. And so it just made for a very interesting book. And I loved the writing. I do really love Shirley Jackson's writing. And so this one, though it wasn't, to me, it wasn't as good as The Haunting of Hill House, it was still a very interesting book. And I loved, you know, the direction it went in and the way it ended and everything. It was really well done. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read a pretty silly book. And the only reason I read this book was because I was trying to fulfill not books in the freezer, I'm sorry, buzzword reading challenge. I wanted to try to read a book with the word magic in the title. And the only book in my house that I haven't read, that had that in the title was Roald Dahl's The Magic Finger. This is a very quick little read. It's like 50 pages. And it's a very silly story about a young girl who you don't even know her name. You don't ever know what her name is. She has this ability to, if she kind of gets mad and she points at you, she can make something bad happen to you. So what happens in the book is her neighbors make her mad one day, and she puts the magic finger on them, and they become ducks, and the ducks become them. And the whole reason that happens is because the father and the two boys in this family are hunters. They hunt ducks for fun, and the little girl didn't like that. She's like, that's mean, that's awful, you shouldn't do that. And so that's why they got swapped. And so the whole book is just silly because the family, they wake up and they have wings like ducks, and they have to like build a nest. And then you have these pictures that just literally made me laugh of these ducks with hands, because the ducks are still duck bodied, but they have human hands instead of wings. So you have like pictures like this that are, it just made me like cackle. I don't know why, I just thought it was so silly. So yeah, the whole story is just really out there. I understand what Dahl was trying to do here. It was obviously a book about anti-hunting, like it's wrong to hunt for sport and to kill animals for fun, and that was the whole point. So I get the message, it's fine, but I feel like it was for the compared to the other Roald Dahl books that I have read, and I mean, and I've given a couple of his books 5 stars. This just did not do anything for me. So I gave it a 2.75. I appreciated the messaging, and like I said, the illustrations were on point, but it was just silly and weird, and because it was so short, you didn't really get a lot of depth or detail from the characters or anything, so it was just whatever. So yeah, I gave it a 2.75. It's definitely not Roald Dahl's best work. Then I did a reread. Well, a reread for me. It was my kids' first time reading this book, but I was so excited to read this aloud to them around Halloween because it's one of my favorite books from when I was a kid, and it's The Haunted Mask by R.L. Stine. This to me is the best Goosebumps book out there, and because it centers around Halloween night and trick-or-treating, I was like, we have to read this as a read aloud for Halloween. And it's about a girl named Carly Beth who gets made fun of a lot by her peers because she is a scaredy cat. She's very easily scared, and so they're constantly like pulling pranks on her and teasing her. And so for Halloween, she's like, I want to be something really scary and just really scare my friends. And so she gets this creepy mask, and let's just say the mask is not normal, and we'll just leave it at that. But this story is so fun, and like I said, just the perfect sort of Halloween type book to read around this time of year, and my kids really liked it. I think even to this day as an adult, it had some good like creepy descriptions. It had some, you know, sort of like intense, you know, scenes, and of course it had those awesome cliffhanger, you know, chapter endings that R.L. Stine is known for, where like my kids, because I would read like 2 chapters a night, and like every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, so they were like, no, you gotta read another chapter, and I was like, nope, we gotta stop, because they wanted to keep going because those cliffhangers. So yeah, it was very fun. My kids enjoyed this, I enjoyed this. All in all, I gave it 4 stars. I don't know why it's not quite a 5 for me. I don't know, but anyways, we had a great time reading this. Then I listened to another like anticipated 2023 release. I listened to it on audio, and I read Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig. And this one is about a family that owns an apple orchard, and they start growing these apples that sort of mysteriously appear, and they are very, very good. He starts to kind of like sell them at the farmer's market and things like that, and the people really like the apples, and the guy, really likes the apples. And the thing about these apples is, yeah, they're like magical. When you eat them, they have like a special power. For example, one of the characters has an injury during the story, and because he's eating these apples, he heals super, super quickly. Like I think he like broke a bone or something, and it healed super quickly. Another character wore glasses, and once he started eating the apples, he didn't have to wear glasses anymore. Like it improved his eyesight. So it has this like magical properties, but also it changes the people and makes them not so great. And it sort of just goes from there. This apple just sort of takes over this town, really. The people become super obsessed with it. And then of course there's a handful of people who don't eat the apple. And so then it becomes kind of an us versus them sort of scenario. And overall, I think this was a unique premise. I have never read a story like this before. And I never thought that I would read a horror novel, because this definitely has some horror elements in it, some great scenes of horror. But I never thought I would read a horror novel where I also learned so much about apples and how they are grown and how they are harvested and how there can be so many different types of apples out there, and the way that like it can be tweaked to change the way they taste and like all this stuff. It was actually very interesting. My only problem with this book was it was so long. Like honestly, this book was, how long was this book? 613 pages. And honestly, I feel like this could have been a 300 to 400 page book. Like it needed some heavy editing. And that's what kind of knocked it down for me, was it was just way too long. And I think when I was listening to it, I had 2 or 3 hours left, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Like I was getting to the point where I was like, when is this gonna end? And that's never good. So for that, I gave this 3 stars. I had a similar experience with the last Chuck Wendig book that I read. I read The Book of Accidents and kind of felt the same way. I thought the story was super unique. I liked the writing a lot, but it was just too long. And that was the case for this one. Though I will say, just like as a side note, I do like Chuck Wendig's writing. In this one especially, the way he writes like people swearing or like cussing. There's one character in here, like some of the stuff that she said made me laugh so hard. So when it comes to cussing, he knows how to write good cussing. But otherwise, yeah, it was a little long, so I gave it 3 stars. And then I finished out the month by reading a poetry collection. And this is the first poetry collection book I have read all year, which is kind of weird, because I've in the past have made a point to try to read more poetry. So it's interesting that I haven't read any all year up until now. But I read the poetry collection Field of Flowers by Charles B. And Charles B. is a Michigan native. And this collection is all about their sort of like, it's sort of like an autobiography told through their relationships. So it made for an interesting collection, because just like in a relationship, there were a lot of like, because you know, obviously when they would enter a new relationship with a new person, you know, everything would be, oh, sunshine and rainbows and happiness and hopefulness. And then of course it would inevitably end. And so then you're on a decline, but then, you know, they get back into another relationship and this sort of cycle continues. So that it sort of went like this. And I thought that that was really interesting. I really liked that. And I thought it was an interesting choice as a way to sort of format or lay out a poetry collection. I don't think I've ever read one like that before, so it was kind of interesting. The poems themselves were pretty good. I really liked the I don't know how to describe it, like the rhythm of some of them. Like I feel like this would be cool to kind of see Charles B. perform, possibly perform them or read them like live or something, like at a reading, to see like how that rhythm would be like listening to it from the poet, because it was just hearing it in my head. It was interesting. It was very musical, I guess, in that way. And I thought that was really cool. So overall, I didn't, oh my gosh, love these, you know, there was a couple poems that I marked that I liked. But otherwise they were good, you know, didn't hate them, didn't love them, but you know, overall it was good. And so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. All right, so that is it. That is my October wrap up. It was a pretty good month, and I did read a lot of spooky things and dark things, which I think was, you know, pretty expected of me. But I'm pleasantly surprised by everything that I read, and that I read 10 things. Granted, some of them were pretty short, but I didn't feel like I read that much throughout the month until I tallied everything up. So yeah, let me know down below what your favorite book of October was, because I would love to know. And again, I apologize for my voice sounding the way it does. Hopefully this cold will be gone soon. So yeah, I apologize for my voice, but like I said in the beginning, I just really wanted to get this out there. So yeah, I hope you guys are having a great week, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.